Alright, in the previous lecture we have learned how to create one-dimensional array and we have performed different operations on it. Now from this lecture we will talk about two-dimensional arrays. Now before diving deep into the operations, let's review one more time what is two-dimensional array. To understand it better, we can visualize a two-dimensional array like this. So as you can see from this picture that two-dimensional array is combination of one-dimensional arrays. It means in one-dimensional array we have one row with multiple columns, and here in two-dimensional array we have multiple rows and multiple columns. So in this case you see that it's combination of three one-dimensional array. Now first one-dimensional array is located at the index of 0, and the second one-dimensional array is located at the index of 1, and the third one-dimensional array is located at the index of 2. So by combining these three one-dimensional array we get two-dimensional array. Now you might be interested, why do we need a two-dimensional array and in which situation we use two-dimensional array. Now the answer is when you deal with matrices, then you have to use two-dimensional array. Many games use two-dimensional array to plot visual environment of a game. Positions in a two-dimensional array are referenced like map using horizontal and vertical reference numbers. So they are doing it with matrices. Another example is the situation of recording temperatures 4 times a day every day. So how can we present this data using arrays? So by using two-dimensional array, we can easily represent this data as rows and columns in our data structure. So in this case, two-dimensional array is very useful. Now in case of two-dimensional arrays, you have to be very careful because here we have two square brackets. But in case of one-dimensional array, we had only one square bracket. So here the first brackets indicates the row and the second brackets indicates the column number. So let's say if we want to access this element over here, first we need to write array name, then we need to write row index, in this case row index is 0, then we need to write column index. So in this case column index is 4. So to access this element we are going to write something like this. Now if you want to access another element over here, for example this element, now in this case first we check that in which row it is located. Now we see that it's located at third row with the index of 2 and the column is sixth column with the index of 5. Now to access this we are going to write array name which is A, then the column index which is 2 and the row index which is 5. Now by writing this we are accessing this element over here. Now as we have in one-dimensional array, here also we have 3 steps for creating two-dimensional array. So here also first we need to declare a reference to the array, then we are instantiating the array, then we are initializing values to the cells of the arrays. Now let's look at what's happening in the memory when we are declaring two-dimensional array. Now when we are declaring an array, we are creating a reference to the array. So a reference gets created over here. The reference name is the ARR, which is the name of array that we are declaring. Now when we are instantiating an array, then in this case the number of cells that we have mentioned over here get initialized in the memory with the default value and the reference link created between this reference variable to this array over here. And this reference variable saves the physical location of first cell over here. Then by using this physical location, we can calculate the other cell's physical location because all cells over here will be located contiguously. Now in the third step, we are initializing array. Now when we are initializing array, we are inserting real values to these cells over here. Now this is our two-dimensional array, but in memory it is reflected as one-dimensional array. So first row comes first, then the second row comes after the first row. So all these cells are located contiguously. So this makes accessibility of the cells in arrays very efficiently because all of them are located contiguously, so we can easily identify their physical locations by using this array reference over here. Now based on these 3 steps over here, let's create two-dimensional array in Java. Now as we mentioned, similar to one-dimensional array, in case of two-dimensional array we also need 3 steps to create two-dimensional array. Now the first step is we are declaring an array. Now when we are declaring array, first we need to write data type, then we need to write reference name of the array. Now in this case, one more time, I'm going to create integer array. So what I'm going to do, I will put the data type. So the data type is int. Then after data type, we have to put 2 brackets over here. Now, as you remember, in case of one-dimensional array, we were putting one square brackets, but in case of two-dimensional array, we have to put two square brackets. Then I'm going to put the name of array. So I will put int to the array. Now with this, we have declared our array. So the first step is completed. Then we are continuing to the second step. Now in the second step, we have to instantiate our array. So this means that the cells of our array will be allocated in the memory. Now we have to define here the size of array. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put the array name into the array, and I'm going to set the size of this array. So to set size of this array, I'm going to put new int. So in this case, in our array, we will have 2 rows and 2 columns. So with this, we are initializing our array in the memory. So in the memory now we have 4 contiguous cells, because as we said, two-dimensional array will be depicted as one-dimensional array in the memory. Now the third step is we have to initialize values for these two-dimensional array over here. Now I'm going to initialize them one by one. So to initialize them, we have to put first the array name. Then we are going to put first 0 row, then 0th column. Then in this case, I'm going to set it to 1. Now I'm going to repeat this step for 4 cells because I want to fill all these cells over here. So I'll just copy it 4 times and I'll change it. Now in the second step, we are adding to 0th row and first column. So it's going to be 2. Then we are adding to first row 0th column. It's going to be 3. Then we are adding to first row and first column. So it's going to be 4. Basically, this is the two-dimensional array that we are creating over here. Now, after doing so, I'm going to print out this array to the console to see how this is working. Now, to print out two-dimensional array to the console, we are going to use arrays library. Now, in the arrays library, we are going to use deep-to-string method. So this method is designed for converting multi-dimensional arrays to strings. The simple toString method works well for simple arrays, but it does not work for multi-dimensional arrays. So that's why we are going to use deep-to-string method. Now, here I'm going to print out this two-dimensional array to the console. So it's going to be system.out.println. So here I'm going to call arrays.deep-to-string, and inside this method is going to be the name of our array. Now if I run our code, you will see that our array gets printed to the console. Now you see that this is the array we have over here and it's get printed out over here. So with these 3 steps, we have declared, instantiate and initialize our array. Now as we said before, we can combine these 3 steps together in one statement. So I'm going to create another array in one statement by combining these 3 steps together. Now this time I'm going to create string type of the array. So I'm going to put string and it's going to be s to the array, and here also after doing so we have to put 2 square bracket. Then we will straight away write our array values, but in this case it's going to be in curly brackets. So it's going to be something like this. So for example, let's say that our array looks like this. So we have to create this array as a two-dimensional array in Java. So it's going to be like this: A, B in the first row, then we are going to declare second row like this, so C and D. Now after doing so, one more time I'm going to print out this two-dimensional array to the console using deep-to-string method. So I'm going to just copy this line of code from here and put it over here. Then I'll change the array name to this string array over here. Now after doing so, let's run our code to see how this is working. Now here you see that our second array also gets printed to the console. So with this line of code, we have combined all these 3 steps over here into the one step. Now with this, we have completed creation of two-dimensional array. Now let's see what's the time complexity for these steps over here. In the first step, we are declaring the arrays. So as we said, it's just creating reference variable in the memory. So this will take a 1 time complexity. Then we are instantiating our array. So when we are instantiating it, it's creating our cells contiguously in the memory. So this will take also a 1 time complexity. Now when it comes to initialization, in this case, all these transactions will take a 1 time complexity. But when we combine them, it's going to take a mn time complexity. Now in this case, m is the number of rows and n is the number of columns, because here we are initializing all cells one by one. So if the number of columns is n and the number of rows is m, so the number of operations that we are going to do over here, m multiplied with n. So in this case, the time complexity will be OMN. Now, interestingly, when it comes to the altogether code over here, when we are doing all these three operations together, the time complexity becomes O1. So it's always advisable to do all these three steps in one statement like this, because this takes O1 time complexity. Now the space complexity is also OMN, where m is the number of rows and n is the number of columns, because in this case we are allocating mn number of cells in the memory. That's why it takes OMN space complexity. Now that's all for this lecture. Here we have learned in which situation we can use two-dimensional array and how can we declare, instantiate and initialize two-dimensional array in Java. Now in the next lecture, let's look at different operations that we can perform on two-dimensional arrays.